All the roads are winding.
Welcome to the show, Yaya. I'm really excited to talk again. It's been a while, and I'm really honored to just be gathered here again. So thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having us. I really just like talking with you.
Thanks. So I like to ask people, who are your ancestors? What are your lineages?
Well, I am very blessed to have family members on both sides who have been asking that question for a long time and recording it. So I didn't actually have to do all of the reclaiming work myself. So on my father's side, we're English, Irish, and German. And the highest concentration of Merrimans actually currently lives in Orkney, Scotland. So I think there's a pretty good chance that we're also Scottish, although that didn't manage to get written down. I think it probably goes back farther than the Ireland connection. And on my mother's side, we are Taino, which is sometimes called Taino Indian or Indigenous South American, lots of different concepts around who are the Taino, but it's a tricultural group of Indigenous Afro-Caribbean and European descent. In our case, the European is Portuguese, and the African is from the Benin and Togo area of Africa, and my genetic haplogroup is from Africa.
Well, that's wild about the Scottish branch as well, how it's not there in writing history, but that's where all the Merrimans seem to be.
And all these little islands used to be part of bigger land masses. So, there's all kinds of little islands around Ireland that, culturally it's pretty clear from the iconography and the languages that at one point we were all one and now we are, scattered. We know how that goes, right?
No, totally. And there were like land bridges and stuff. I mean, if you go way back. Geology lesson, everybody. So where do you live now, and who are the original stewards and people of that land?
Well, I am very blessed to live for just the last year in the Cuyamaca region of Kumeyaay territory. So it's a little mountain range to the east of what's sometimes called San Diego. And just as a side note, Cuyamaca actually means skywater or beyond the clouds, which I didn't find out till after I named my homestead Rio Cosmico.
Oh, cool. That is so cool. For anyone who might not understand that, can you elucidate, please?
So I don't know what the tradition of naming homesteads comes from, but it feels intrinsic. It feels like it's always been there. Lots of people around here, they have a name for their ranch. There's Moonrise Creek Ranch and these kinds of things. And for me, it's not a ranch. I'm not doing any animal husbandry here, but it is my homestead, and which to me means that I don't need to leave to make a living, that I live and work here, and the land takes care of me, and I take care of the land, or I'm learning to take care of the land in exchange. And so Rio Cosmico means cosmic river in my mother tongue of Spanish, and that's the whole world within that name. But for the cosmic river, the water comes from above. It's dry here in on the terrestrial plane, and so to come here and be here and learn that they also had a great respect for the spiritual power that is the sky waters meant a lot to me. It's a deep confirmation of my intuition.
I really love that. That's a great confirmation. Nice really tapping into the energy and being able to articulate it. So I'm curious to hear, you reached out saying that a dream came to you about stuff we're doing at Earth Speak. So I'm wildly curious to hear about this.
Well, I was just really delighted. It felt spontaneous and informal to just reach out and say, hey, I know we've done a little bit of live communicating before, and would you want to explore this dream that we had about you on the air? So that just was really fun that you're like, yeah, let's do it.
I love dreams so much.
Well, interestingly, like some people that I've talked to have been like, felt like it was like inappropriate to ask them about their dreams because they're traditions that hold that they're very, very personal, and they are very personal, and they reveal a lot about the dreamer more than anything contained in it. But I was taught the opposite, and trained in many different traditions that our dreams aren't for us, that it's a public service. Like if we catch something, it's for the community, for the good of the community. So I hold that orientation. I take that orientation. And so for, maximum, not altering the transmission at all now that I'm like here or maybe feeling nervous, I wanted to read it if that was all right. It's about a long paragraph long. I want to read it, and then you can, ask me questions, or we can just see where that takes us.
Okay.
But my feeling when I woke up was, first was I need to join the village. I had seen that you were doing this thing, and I've heard and felt so much kind of, I'll just be honest and say, torment around what has happened to the mycelial space of social media, that many of us, I feel, are the reason that it got so big so fast and was so successful, because like real intuitive web weavers were recognizing it as a usable space and bringing our magic to it. So to find a structure that was suitable and inhabit it. Like that's the dream, I think, of all man-made things. You build a structure, and hopefully if Shakti likes it enough, she'll inhabit it and it will become alive. So that happened. And then it felt like the structure maker said, oh, wait, like you're too powerful now. We're going to just take some of this back and get really involved with controlling. And there's lots of magic that uses a lot of language around harnessing, invoking, controlling the powers. So I feel that we as the elementals flowed into that space because it seemed like it was made for us, and that there was going to be a partnership of spirit and matter. And then that agreement, maybe that like verbal or psychic agreement wasn't honored from my perspective. And so there's a feeling of betrayal that a lot of people are feeling, having brought themselves to the space as a living, organic, intuitive being, and then finding there to be all of these doors to be painted doors, and all of these promises to be no longer like possible. So all of that said, when I saw what you were doing with the village, it just felt a little rejoice of anyone ever who moves beyond the feelings of betrayal. And maybe there was some grieving that you had to do at some point, I don't know, around the changes, but into empowered creation of other solutions or other experiments. And just, I'm sure there's lots of those happening, but yours was the first one that really caught my eye as having that vibration, or that signature of something alive, and of nature, really. So it was there, but there's lots of invitations. The world, the day, the plate is full, life is loud, the psychic channels are crowded. And so I just kind of thought, that's cool, I'll check that out at some point, and I kept kind of just thinking that, and like seeing your post and just sort of like, yay, just cheering you on from a distance. And so I felt the dream was like the next level of my intuition saying, no, like, go join the village. And so, even then it took me a while after getting that to actually do it. I'm slow, but I'm getting there because I'm being guided to come there. And this dream was part of that guidance. And so, and then after receiving that instruction as the primary purpose. This sort of seemed to be a secondary purpose of like wanting to share with you this dream as like a blessing, like as some kind of a like, for whatever reason, my intuition is picking up things that seem to say like, you're going to get to do this for a long time, and you're going to get the chance to develop it into whatever you dreamed it could be, and it's going to be good. And I wanted to share that with you. So thank you for the opportunity. So what I titled the dream, because it's actually part of the technology of Dreamwork to always give your dream a title, it moves the content to a different area of your brain. And in the process of moving across from one side of your brain to another, we get more information about what it all means. So this was on September 5th of 2021. And I titled it, "The Divine Masculine is Embodied in the Village Community." So, I'm at a large festival feeling disoriented and alone. I leave one space and find myself in a very suburban-style residential 2-story home that is in the middle of the festival and being run like a salon, with Natalie from Earthspeak as the proprietress, although maybe a 10 years older version of her. You need to be a member of an app called The Village to enter, and I am, so I go inside and explore. There is a very interesting custom-built software interface. There is one computer that anyone can use, family style, in the living room, and by signing in, we all get all of our emails on the same computer and simply trust that no one is reading anyone else's. I'm comfortable with this while I'm physically present here in the house, but feel I need to be careful to remember to sign out when I'm not physically present. I'm impressed to see that the men's wellness guide, Supernova Sloan, a musician acquaintance that I know to have 5 #1 hits but be pretty humble about it, and other men I feel to be embodied in their masculine creative power are part of the community, and all seem very relaxed, friendly with each other, and honoring to me, treating me with respect from the very first encounter, with no flirting or drama, like we're old friends. I am surprised and happy to find that this is the vibe here. It's not what I expected. The musician knows that I am a seer and asks me what he should get tattooed on his chest. I tell him it will sound cliche, but what I see very clearly is the outline of a large bird like a hawk that covers his whole chest with the wings extending down his arms, the outline made up of a square tribal pattern, maybe 3/4 of an inch thick. I explained that I saw the Taino meander pattern, which is similar to the Greek key motif, but that his guides were clear that it does not have to be a meander, just a square tribal pattern with meaning to him and his ancestors. Another one of the men is like a young version of Jakob from the TV show Sex Education, if he were mixed with 1 part Werner Herzog and a dash of Elon Musk. Another is a local man who lives in my town in real life, who used to be a very successful heavy metal singer, but now is part of a triad of men that helps other men integrate emotionality into their identity as men. In the dream, I'm seeing how all of these men are very different from each other, and all have a very hetero, masculine presentation, not walking with a persona as a role as a farmer or teacher or cook or wizard, the kind of archetypes they tend to associate with green magic and be interested in. I realize in the dream that although not really what I would think of as my type, all are attractive to me as friends and collaborators. I register that the common denominator is that these men are embodied, warm, friendly, respectful, empowered in their life, world, and career, and genuinely amused by and honoring, present and kind toward me and all the other people present, seeming to really see folks for who they are, respect everyone's role / creative work in the world, and their contribution to this and other communities, the spirit of community, wherever, however, and whenever it is showing up. The end.
Thank you. Thank you for your public service. All right. Do you want to share? I mean, there's synchronicities and things coming up for me, but I'd love to hear kind of, you've had time to sort of dwell and maybe unpack it, and anything else you want to share about it.
Well, I think to potentially just own the parts that are important to me as the dreamer are that I had, my father was an addict and died early. And so I had a big question of like, what is a man? Just not really seeing it. And a lot of my uncles had a similar path, and people around me. It was very common where I grew up in rural Connecticut. There wasn't a lot of work. People had to drive really far to find work. People were on the road commuting all day, and they drank to manage stress. And they'd all died around 50, 51, 52. Everyone I know, it was like a plague. It took all the dads when people were in middle school or high school or early college and kind of formative young adult years. So this question has taken me, all over the world, to all kinds of very strange healing modalities, to really push myself outside of my comfort zone, to try things. When I realized, in my early 30s, I woke up one morning with the thought really clearly in my head, oh, I'm in real trouble now, because I can see clearly that I've lost all rapport with the masculine and I don't care. Like, it wasn't like, it was the combination. It's like, we come in and out of relationship or whatever, but it's like, I've lost rapport and I've lost even a memory of why that matters. And I went that day online to find a male therapist to go to and start like this serious work of understanding what had happened to me and what was going on and becoming conscious of this. So, the shortest answer is just, I think I've spent a lot of lifetimes as like the lady of the lake or as in training in Avalon. And so I just make a joke that it's like, we all did lots of whispering about what we thought a man might be. There was like this one book about it that we passed around the library and had a lot of fun with, but like, we don't actually know. It's all based on like the myths. And because as I just think I've dwelled for a long time in a place that was holding the information about the definition of woman. And I had this job. So I think in this lifetime, I'm kind of here to like move beyond that. And so my personal spiritual practice and healing has had a lot to do with that. And when I'm in ceremony with my teachers, it's in the Red Road, which is not, it's not a women's only teaching space or healing space. So it's like, my role and my work is in these women, holding these women's only spaces for those who need that, because there are people who are still at the point in their journey where that is absolutely the medicine. But that's not who I am anymore, like that's not the totality of who I am. So if I thought about community, I think in the past, it would kind of unconsciously be like sisterhood. And that's why I would go to something that was saying it was a community. So I think that I needed this little bit of reorientation to even hear the invitation of like what the village is, because nowhere in the description does it say it's just sisterhood or it's just for women. But I needed to receive that really clearly as like a download, a transmission, from a trustworthy source, being, source, that this is an all gender space, and that the hetero men in this space are safe. They're because that's, something I've been working on, and that a lot of us have needed to do a lot of work around. If we have had unhealthy masculine role models. So it's like I have something now that's like right in there in my heart. The frequency and essence installed, if you will, that tells me that this is true. That your all gender community space attracts healthy, respectful, creative, fun, attractive, masculine heterosexual masculine people, in addition to all the other genders that I am, admit more comfortable with when I'm vulnerable and want to relax and just be.
Yes, it's we're very deliberately made it all gender. We're like, this is not just for women's healing. This is all healing because we feel that that's just where we are in our lives and what everyone in the world, we need these spaces that these magical folks, no matter gender nor identity, masculine, feminine, identifying, or what body you inhabit, that we can be humans together and be in our own feminine or masculine embodiment, however that wants to come through, but then show up. And it's I think it's really interesting that you had this dream. And I wanna ask you about your own sense of embodying the masculine within you. And thanks for sharing your story about how you were so heavily identified with holding this feminine knowledge and embodiment and vibration. And have you had to I kind of wanted to hear a little bit of characterization of what your experience was like, recognizing whether or not you were embodying your inner masculine, what that means to you, and how your journey unfolded from there. Because I feel like masculine means something different to everyone as well. So a little bit of definition would be helpful.
Absolutely. Like, I have teachers that I have interviewed that are goddess scholars that just won't even touch these kind of questions because it's just like you said, every word becomes so prismatic when you get into the way I experience gender, which is and goddess and reality, which is in spectrums of consciousness. That is a definition of Tantra. And I have practiced Tantra for almost a decade. So that had to have done something to my way of experiencing things. But then also it had to be meeting me somewhere in terms of the way I was already experiencing things. So I think at first, my call to the dialogue at all was to just a call to goddess, and I just knew that word had so much magnetism for me, and it was nothing around me was celebrating that or saying what that was about. So it really was just a call to say, where do I do this? How do I do this? Be a goddess worshiper. I want to do it. I want to embody something. I want to learn about everything there is to know about it. It was a hunger. And so I love what the traditional tantric perspective is. These goddesses are feminine, but ultimately beyond gender. And that is how I actually experience these beings, these fields of consciousness when I meet them. And especially when I meet them in medicine spaces where it's really the deepest kind of conversation that can be had. It's it is a paradox because Gnosis will tell me that's Sarasvati or this is Kali. I always just know. I don't have to pick through the iconography and say, there's the full breasts, there's the yoni. It doesn't, they come to me in their aniconic form, which means, not anthropomorphized. So further, there are no breasts and there is no yoni. There, the mandalas, the yantras, patterns of energy moving through my body. And so it is clairsentience that tells me this is a goddess, or this is a Dakini, or this is a nature spirit, or this is a god. And so I feel I can trust that because it's actually beyond all qualities. They're just telling me who they are. And yet in those forms, they don't have the associations that we might have like, women who are raised under patriarchy by men who are not embodied, have associations with masculine as predator, so they, or whatever, whatever your associations might be. There are certain aspects that just are, but without any associations, without any like, oh, I don't want to be this, or I don't want to be that, or I don't want to be considered feminine because then you won't give me this job that is physically demanding. Like, so those are all like stuff that clouds the issue of whether or not we want to assign a certain gender to things, that we can't escape these associations. They have to be acknowledged. And then I mentioned I had a long healing journey that I don't think is over, around healing like relationship and trust in the masculine, that actually involved, learning that I'm feminine, but ultimately beyond gender, and learning that a lot of people view a lot of my qualities as a quadruple Aries. Indigenous people generally consider fire to be masculine. So as a quadruple Aries, a lot of people see me as embodying a lot of masculine qualities and think of me as not very feminine, as kind of androgynous and difficult and stubborn and forceful, and things that some people don't want to consider that the feminine could be. And so the shortest answer is like, I love the journey. I love the dialogue. I love what they're doing at Mogadao, where they have taken these a traditionally binary kind of medicine tradition and just taken the words masculine and feminine out and said, well, don't you think we're ready to just talk about the qualities? If we're using these words as shorthand for certain qualities, then why don't we just talk about the qualities? So that tradition is creating a really beautiful space for people where those titles chafe, can practice without the chafing. And I think that's absolutely necessary. The titles don't chafe for me. And I have to be honest about that too. And so the kind of space that I create is one where we do use those words, but with a lot of room, and hopefully enough room for people who need to unpack them, to say, what do we mean? They're not so monolithic and set, and we can redefine, and we are redefining them. So a lot of folks would call my space a queer medicine space, but even like that title kind of chafes for me, just because it means it has come to connote a particular frequency, when it began as a word for everything that was not masculine and feminine. So the everything else, the void of possibilities. So, as a person who I'm very comfortable embodying quote unquote masculine traits, I've come to know what archetypes I embody that I consider like, my inner masculine is like a hermit wizard who's not on social media, who would have lived under a tree in the past with dreadlocks and long, dirty fingernails, but now usually lives in their car. This is my Shiva. The car is the new yogi cave in the West. It's private, it's safe. It's total autonomy. And so one-room cabins, cars, not a lot of technology, deep ties to the mushroom people, long hair, many, many hours of practice a day. Practice meaning being with the breath, being very, kind of a little bit of an ascetic. So that's my Shiva, and it's good to know. It really helps navigating everyone else's versions when you get the transmission internally. When you get that awareness in your own inner quest, doesn't come from the outside or anything conditioned or decided or any archetype assembled for you in a package and called whatever. So I'm a person that likes to have sex with both men and women, and who is currently in a relationship with a heterosexual man, but have learned a lot from being in relationships with queer men and queer women and bisexual women and straight women, uh, quote unquote straight women. So all of that I share just to say it informs my questing and. And to create access for others who are similarly questioning without implying that I could ever be like a safe space for all beings at all times. I'm just endeavoring to be.
Thank you for that articulate response. I love it. And yeah, I'm going to pause and catch the next question.
I think I do want to add that it can be confusing because of my passion for goddess, and that my job in the world is holding a women's initiatory journey and descent to the goddess. So it's pretty hard to say, this is who I am, and then this is what I do as one part of who I am. I think it does confuse people, and that's fair.
I mean, there's so much emphasis on identity and people wrapping their whole being up in one nice, neat little identity package that others can digest. And so it makes sense that what you present, what you do might get confused as who you're being, who you be.
Yes.
And does not encompass the full spectrum of it.
And I would like to kind of add to that dynamic of why that's problematic, that it's kind of become conflated with the value of transparency, as if we could ever be completely transparent about who we are, given that who we are is dynamic if we're healthy. And so then if you try to clearly articulate an identity that will help people manage their expectations of what they will get when they come and step into a space with you, and then something occurs in the dynamism of relationship that is outside of what was clearly articulated, it is in these times, this is new, but always not always, but often pointed to as some kind of a failure of transparency, which to me feels entitled.
And short-sighted.
And unreal, just not possible. It's
like,
I feel if I'm going to make an agreement to relate with you, I'm entitled to know everything there is to know about you. That takes time. That takes the developing of trust and a moving through consensual shedding of necessary preliminary boundaries, like healthy intimacy. I can and should be a process of discovery and of resolving the apparent paradoxes of the embodied being.
Yeah. I mean, this really resonates for me right now because even after being in a relationship, monogamous relationship, I'm married to someone for 10 years. The past month has rocked my world and opened my eyes to patterns that I couldn't see, but I've been living in for my whole life. And I'm like, wow, this is changing our relationship. And I couldn't have ever been fully transparent about it because I was so in the water, I couldn't see the water. I was just the fish swimming in it. And now I'm like, wait, I'm in water. And I'm like, whoa, what's going on? So it's like,
there's so much of it.
These things happen. And so I couldn't have ever possibly been like, here's all my trauma patterns and why I have them and why I'm attracted to you based on your trauma patterns. Let's relate. Like now I'm like, oh wait, I can see it so clearly now. Like, Yeah, and I think that I would love if the world would have spaciousness for people to have that, because we don't all have hardly anything figured out.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think, some of us start with like one intimate relationship and then move outward into taking those um, skills into increasingly complex relationships with, business partners, saying, I think I figured something out about this, like not being an offender, being an ethical relator. Like I'm going to try like to have a business partner, or, maybe invite a third person into my marriage, or, all the different ways that urges that we have when we're feeling confident that we've like mastered some lesson or other. And then, I think for me, I gave up on the monogamous relationship as the right learning environment for what I was trying to learn. And I spent 5 solid years going really like hard and deep into like everything uncomfortable that held something, or they seemed to hold something interesting to me, but seemed like a mixed bag, like 50-50 of like things I want and things I don't want, like to just try to strengthen my navigation, I guess, before being ready to try like an intimate relationship with one person, in which like I'm really available for the karmic stuff. Because the way that I was navigating polyamory and shared relationships, it was because I wanted lovers. I wanted experimentation. I wanted exploration. I wanted to learn about myself. I didn't want a partner. But at some point, I discovered the part of me that did want to try that again. And even then it took a lot, a lot for me to really open, to allow the relating to pull things up, because I've always said like love is karmic super glue, and like romantic relationships are the favored medium of evolution. It's like that's what all that like hot sexy stuff is for. Like it's a reward, and it's an incentive to keep you at the table as evolution pulls things up from your bloodlines and unlocks some things that require a really strong commitment, that nobody would stay and dance you through the lesson that wasn't really committed. So I think it's really cool that you have a 10-year relationship and that you're getting to see some of the mechanism of that, like some of what that 10-year investment now enables you to do together is in terms of spiritual, evolutionary, healing work. Excited for you.
Thank you. I mean, it's like walking through a freaking fire, but also I'm like, this is the key of liberation from these ancestral patterns. And so recognizing that helps to keep going through it and trusting that. I'm curious to hear, through your adventures in relating, what have you come to understand as a healthy dynamic between masculine and feminine versus maybe some of the unhealthy dynamics that we embody in the patriarchy, or that how do we fail to embody the healthy dynamics because of the world we live in?
Mm-hmm. So, I'm fond of making memes that the only other people who get them are Shakta Tantra practitioners.
That is so niche.
3 people laugh hysterically and no one else likes if I post them. But one of them is I have this set of stuffed octopus that are 3 sizes, tiny ones and one medium one and one really big one. And I bought them because I thought they'd be a good teaching tool for like masculine and feminine, that we could take some of the language out. So, okay, we have these octopuses, a massive one, a medium one, and 4 small ones. that are pink and fuzzy and soft and have all kinds of curly legs. And then I wish I had them with me. Short-sighted of me. And then the other one is stuffed banana with a bell. I bought them all together. And the meme was,
Wait, where were you shopping when you bought all these?
There's a place in San Diego that's like it's a gift shop that's run by an artist who spent like many years refining like small brands, making nice things that are nice for gifts. And so it was in their like children's section. It's called Pigment. And it was a splurge too. Like I couldn't afford it at all. I put it on a credit card, probably still paying them off, It was just like, I have to do this. And so the meme is all of the octopus in a big pile that fills the whole square and the bananas in the middle. And they're both saying to each other, "You're cute. What do you do around here?" And then underneath it says Shiva and Shakti under patriarchy. And because the traditional definition of Shiva and Shakti is not these two separate things. We kind of say it's like, okay, through the union of opposites, we come to know the source of opposites. So if you take two things that you think of as opposite and you bring them together in the most intuitive and desirable way possible, you will be catapulted into the great beyond where you realize that we're all one. That's one way that some traditions talk about them. But my tradition says more like they're like two sides of the same hand. It's not even a coin. It's not even a discrete object. It's something that's part of something bigger. And they're literally just, it's a trick. It's a distinction of the third dimension that's somehow necessary in the third dimension to even say front of the hand, back of the hand. And like most of the time, it's just hand. And most of the time, no one's referring to my hand. People are referring to Yaya, like, so it's just a dynamic of, to me, points to that everything is a collaboration. So even me, that's considered one distinct thing, is a collaboration of all my organs and I've had conversations with the different little elves that run my heart, the lots of different discrete little beings inside the one thing that's my heart, So in that context, to bring that's what I really kind of mean, Shiva Shakti, that, bring it down. We could call it masculine and feminine, bring it down further and say, how is that, how does that show up in my personal relating? The dynamics that I've had to overcome started out with being invisible to the masculine under patriarchy. So being a very wiggly little elemental being who just, my mom said, "Oh my gosh, I could not believe how much you talked." And, having everybody just be like, "What are you? What is this little ball of life?" To just noticing the things I talked, the things I noticed, the things I talked about, the things I wanted to talk about, the questions that I had, the way I moved my body, the way I wanted to dress, that every single thing was the wrong X, the big red X of wrong. And it did not matter. It was every single thing about me. And so learning that only women care about whatever it is that I am and whatever it is that I have and whatever it is that I'm carrying. And if I don't exist, I'm invisible to this other half of the population. This doesn't include kids, boys. They're, under 7. We're sort of considered belonging to spirit still in many traditions. So, boys under 7, I had lots of male friends, maybe even more male friends than female friends. But it's after that. And so I could never figure out what I was doing to get the taser, the sort of, it felt like a taser set on low to my aura, to my auric field. Every time I tried to interact with a hetero male over the age of 7. But I could never figure out what I was doing differently. So I've learned a lot about autism, and I believe that the healing arts are the autistic genius of the high-functioning female autistic. That's like the third dimension's pathological language for certain configurations. And so I've learned a lot from high-functioning women autistics that will talk a lot about how they learned to fake being normal. And so you go into studying all of the behaviors of people who are getting their needs met and who are getting attention and who are getting called on in class and winning prizes and, being celebrated for their contributions, and try to do them. But that was a really bad idea for me, because some of us are just worse, not as good at faking it as other people. So then it was like I was going to them and trying to force them to pay attention to me, and the attention that I got was abusive. Was verbally abusive, was a lot of bullying, was like big bullying campaigns, like groups of men like ganging up and collaborating with the creative project being to tuck me back in to the void, and it's, something I don't talk about a lot, but that, I have like a great deal of abuse from the teenage masculine, configuration, whatever that is, whatever they are going through. And so I always had my dad and my grandfather and a boyfriend or a male partner when I was younger, and that was it. There would never be, I would work in all women's workplaces. If I worked in a bar, everyone behind the bar would be women. If I worked in a dress shop, everybody, there were these kind of harems in a way of like protected spaces within the patriarchal system where we were all together, but not necessarily conscious. And so first, when I was working in public schools, that was coming out of that. And working in prisons, that was coming out of that. And nonviolent communication was a tool that I learned as an educator and as a mediator, like working in all men's maximum security prisons. So, if you can get the drift that I can go between extremes, that I really learned the beauty and the magic of that modality. And I clung to it like a life raft, and I'm still clinging to it. I've learned to see that there are some shadows there and some ways that, it can be used and seen as tone policing or things like that, like in the last couple of years, but I'm still on that life raft as the best tool that I've ever found to navigate any kind of conflict between any perceived conflict between like self and other. So masculine, feminine, whatever, student, teacher, partner. And so first, that tool gave me the ability to stand up for myself within a marriage where I'd married a friend, but we got into the karmas hard, and we poured all of our resources into over 5 years of marriage and family counseling, and it was not sufficient to keep the relationship healthy. So that whole end of that marriage was around just being myself. So the pattern was, I'm afraid that if I'm myself, then I won't be loved. I'll be abandoned. I won't be given a job. I'll be fired from my job. I won't be able to eat, and I'll die. Which comes from my ancestry, from my family in Puerto Rico, from being a colonized people. It's like, if you do not obey, then you will die. And so the fear of being ostracized and exposed and left to die was the biggest thing I needed to overcome. That's deep in my nervous system. And it only happens through trying, through being afraid and speaking my truth anyway around basic stuff. Like, no, I'm not going to do the dishes right now. I know it's kind of my turn, and I know you did a lot, but I have a migraine and I can't see. So I'm not going to do the dishes right now because I can't see. And it feels like I'm walking on razor blades, you know? So if you can't even do that with your own like intimate partner, like just be real, which, you know, I couldn't for a long time, then what hope really is there for you to do it in your workplace or with your business partner or in your coven? And then I'll try to be quick because I can go on and on about this, but then it's like
take up the space.
Okay. I learned that, you know, when that 10-year marriage did finally, we spent about 5 years uncoupling, just seeing, you know, what if we just take out this agreement or that agreement, or what if we can see other people, or what if we really, I don't know if anyone's ever spent as long trying to change the character of a relationship before ultimately saying, you know, right relationship is only speaking when it relates to things that our son needs. And that's where we have been. But because it was so difficult for me to learn to express myself, and my focus of my study of nonviolent communication was learning to speak my truth, I actually missed the other half of what makes nonviolent communication work, is becoming a good listener. And that kind of was made very starkly apparent to me in 2020, when pressures were placed on all communities and all relationships and all existing agreements, but also in especially intersectional communities, where there were things that needed to be talked about that we never had put on the table, or maybe didn't have any experience talking about, like race. You know, we're going to learn Dreamwork and plants and nutrition. You know, I don't have experience holding space for conversations about race, and I underestimated the difference between that conversation and other conversations, because I do hold space for difficult conversations. And women's have 10 years of experience in Women's New Moon Lodge, which new moon work is around pulling things out of the shadow. What's in the shadow? What's in the shadow? Let's talk about it. So I was overconfident about my ability to say, that's in the shadow? Okay, let's talk about it. And then just to learn that, you know, actually there's people who've been talking about this as their primary walk in the world, and they've figured some things out. And there's some language and some specific understanding of how certain words are being used in this context that I was unaware of. And so when it's time to listen, being someone who, like, my North Node is about like being here to speak, and to speak in ways that nurture. And so it's really easy for me to just feel like, okay, I'm here to speak, so I need to learn how to speak, and to feel justified in maybe not being equally qualified as a listener. And so it's like 2020 really showed me there's another whole 50% of this modality that needs to be really deeply thrown myself into, in the same way that I've thrown myself in learning to come out of hiding as a woman and as a woman of color, and that I'm not the relator that I thought myself to be, and humbling, and that I really need to work on being a better listener. And so when you talk about your personal relationship feeling like the fire, that's where I'm at, or I have shown myself to be good enough at taking care of myself and advocating for myself, and of listening to, you know, earn the weird gold medal of intimate partnership, committed intimate partnership. And now I get to practice listening, because they grew up in a conflict zone, and the kind of trauma that they have, they're not from this country. The kind of trauma that they have does not look or smell or act like any of the male trauma that I know and recognize and have some experience with. And it's very triggering for me to hold space when that is the invitation. And I feel like, well, I failed at holding space for the most important space holding gig of my life in 2020 because I was not recognizing when it's time, not a teachable moment, when it's not like my turn to talk, it's time for me to listen and hold space and be the investigator that draws out someone else's experience who might not be clear on what they have to say, but may nevertheless have something important to say. So like getting to practice, getting to sit in the fire of having that in my home, having that having the triggers come up when I'm in my own bed, when I just took a shower and had a great meditation and I'm ready to cuddle and there comes a trigger and the trauma instead. And there's really no ethical way to punt it, to like hot potato it, like when it's very clear. You said you wanted to do this. You said you wanted to be in an intimate relationship and you wanted to relate and you wanted them to hold space for you and to be a safe space. And you told them exactly what that would look like. So now can you be that? And just close your mouth, and like really open your ears, because that's a physical sensation I get when I'm like here listening versus when I'm hearing. Like really let it in, and it just feels like I'm dying. It feels like I'm drowning, but I don't drown and I don't become overwhelmed. I don't. That's really it. Is just sitting in that moment and being like, you're not going to die, to let this frequency in and to let this other person's perspective in. Just breathe. Just don't talk. It's not your turn. And breathe and feel the sensations of your skin being set on fire, your throat closing up, the like heart palpitations, everything in your nervous system telling you like, retreat, retreat, retreat. You're going to get attacked. You're going to get accused of something. You're not being understood. You're not being seen. It's like, just, this isn't the moment. You can tell them that later, This is the moment where you let them be in the space with all of their full self. So, I love that you started off with sitting in the fire, and like that's what it is. Like we don't have, our medicine tradition in the West is psychology. So learning to be a listener, that's our fire ceremony. Like that's what the yoginis have with the homam and the sitting in their inner fire, and what we have in South America with, at the heart of the peyote ceremony or all these other medicine ceremonies. It's really the peyotes for me is helping me hold my seat and at the fire, but it's really the fire that's doing the work. So I believe that this is our fire ceremony as Westerners.
When you're listening for your partner and you feel those things coming up, do you think that that's your trauma response coming up? And that's
yes,
something.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I think a healthy person would not have this, but also a person who was healthy in these exact ways likely would not be attracted to this particular person in this particular way, because that is part of the mechanism of attraction. So I think it's perfect. I'll sometimes call it karmic superglue, but sometimes call it karmic poetry, where it's like, I have the lock, which is my own feelings of unsafety around my father's emotions as an addict, as a Pisces addict. His emotions were very penetrative in a very watery way. So it was just like this, like getting in there everywhere. It's very hard to hold a boundary with like unhealthy Piscean energy, because it's like being underwater and then someone saying, just have a boundary, or like ask the water to respect your boundaries. It's like soaking into my pores right now. What, so because of that experience of my household, of my family of origin, you said before, like, I'm just a fish. I didn't realize I was in this water. It's like, I'm just a fish that didn't realize that it was in unhealthy water. And so when particularly, I mean, it's everyone, but just like women, I don't know. I think it's sort of different. It's just a different flavor to the kinds of things we're healing from in this culture. Like most of my clients, most of my students are going to be of a Western configuration, or mixed. A lot of mixed, bicultural, multicultural people, because, you know, that's me. But it brings up memories of being in my house and my dad getting triggered, and just having reality wrong as an addict, just seeing something in a way that it wasn't, and just going so hard at it, and being an authority figure. And this feeling of being wrongly accused of something that I just categorically didn't do, even if that something is just being a certain way or meaning, you said this, but you really meant that. Or like, that's from my family of origin, that kind of thing of like, I know what you really think, or I know what you really meant. That is like the biggest trigger for me, because it just feels like we're not relating at all. I'm just like a springboard for your trauma, because if you don't trust me enough to be the expert of what I thought, if I tell you I did this because I was in a rush, and someone says, no, you did that because I was in a rush and I forgot. No, you did that because you blah, blah, blah. That's like the biggest trigger for me. Like if I'm no longer able to use my words and be vulnerable and be honest and share with you about, take responsibility for why I did or said what I did. And someone says, no, this other reality, like, then it's like, then comes the tidal wave, and then I just, out to sea, and not the sparkling sea foam and Yemaja on the surface of the sea, but the like churning black depths. And, I panic, and I get overwhelmed, and we become terrified and kind of whiny and small and pandering. Like, just what do I do to try to get this person to calm down or be rational or believe me? And so that's another pattern I've done a lot of unpacking in therapy this year, is around, you don't do so much explaining. If somebody is upset with you, like I would go into, oh, this is just a misunderstanding. So let me just explain to you how it really was. And then there'll be no misunderstanding. Like that was a huge pattern. Yeah. And then I just like to have people be like, you're being defensive, or you're gaslighting me, or whatever. And me being like, oh, when I think it's a misunderstanding and that the invitation is to explain where I'm coming from, then people identify that as defensiveness or gaslighting, because the invitation is not for me to explain where I'm coming from. The invitation is for me to try to understand where they're coming from. And so it's like I really just had to get brought back to some real basics of like holding space. If I was minding my own business, having a good time, and someone else comes to me and says they're upset, then it's their turn to have space held for them. And if in the process of me holding space for them, they say things that trigger me, that's another. I can go and process that in my personal practice, in my journaling, with my therapist, with my communication tools. And when I gain clarity around that, and I can come and then I can request a nonviolent communication from them to unpack, hey, some things you said in that conversation really triggered me. Had some time to think about it. Are you available to hear how that conversation affected me, And be prepared for them to say, no, I was asking you to hold space for me. You hurt me. Like, then that's what your therapist is for. That's what your mom is for, like just having to relearn. And I think that's what the real learning is. It's like a spiral, and you just come back to different lessons, but it's just getting a lot more clarity on like recognizing what time it is and whose turn it is.
And that inherent with nonviolent communication is that we're all coming from a place of our needs and whether our needs are met or not, and whether they got met as children or not, and whether that created trauma or not, and how we respond.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So thank you for that. I think, I love exploring these ways of relating. And I kind of want to come back around to this dream you had on the village and just maybe do a little unpacking interpretation of that. And it's some synchronicities that showed up, as you mentioned, there, this vision, you were this seer for this man who asked about a tattoo he should get, and he had this this hawk. And today in my meditation, after I had done I do a lot of like clairvoyant work and using clairvoyant techniques to move energy. And I was just doing it around my own trauma patterns and things. And then afterwards, this very strong vision of a hawk eagle. I was like, I don't know my birds enough. I was like, it looks like a hawk. It's not a falcon. It's either a hawk or an eagle. Came in and I was like, wow, big hawk eagle energy. And then today, while I was, I had no idea what your dream was or what it was about, and today walking just, right before our conversation, maybe an hour or an hour and a half, I was really just feeling into my own sense of divine masculine in me, of like my own, not even divine masculine, but just like, how am I embodying or not embodying masculine energy, and what does that even look like, and how all this stuff was just coming up. So I love that the synchronicity of this dream being about the masculine and bringing this hawk energy and bringing this relating and bringing community. And I mean, I certainly hope that we can continue as a team at Earthspeak to grow and learn how to hold space and create community in a way that does facilitate this embodiment. I love how you describe the embodiment of this space of being able to come in and not be not be flirted with, just be like humaned with, yeah. And that is something I hope to offer the world, is like, can we all understand we have our traumas, we have our needs that weren't met, we have our flaws, we have our gifts, we have our medicine, we have our beauty, and how can we come together and be together and find connection in a world that just constantly tries to disconnect and fragment us. So yeah, if there's anything coming up for you that in response, I'd love to hear. Because it wasn't really a question, it's more a share. But yeah.
Yeah, I think that I tend to like think of primordial reality as feminine, which is like what makes someone as a Shakta versus like a Shaivite. And believe is the wrong word. I just experience that. And so I typically will think and study and spend a lot of time like making art and writing about the spectrum of the feminine. And just as a seer, learning the archetypes is very useful, because when you meet somebody who presents with an unfamiliar energy, rather than judging it as like a negative or a dark energy, which I'm sure we've all experienced with like a quote unquote bad psychic reading, or somebody's like judging you. They're like a little bit psychic, but they're judging you. Like it's because the archetypes that you're holding are not the archetypes that they've studied. So if you don't fit into anything in there, like, you're not any of the queens of the tarot or whatever, and like, what is that? And I experience that a lot, is being in psychic spaces where someone's like, there's an energy here. I just don't even know what to do with it. And I've learned to roll my eyes a little bit, because I feel it's the wisdom goddesses that even if you're in India and you say, yeah, I want to go to that temple, you have cab drivers that'll like kick you out of the cab. They're like, no, I'm not taking you to that temple. Like, or, a lot of Indian women that I collaborate with that are practitioners and yoginis who don't know the goddesses that I'm closest with. So I don't know why that is. That's just the way that my path has unfolded. But I like it because it enables me to embrace a bigger spectrum of the feminine. But I think that I'm learning over time to understand that the masculine also can be a prism, can be a spectrum, and there's just so many different kinds of magic, or so many different ways of thinking. Okay, if there are these two different sets of qualities, what do we call them and why? And what do we do with them? That it's really only one tradition that I know of that kind of says that there's this 64 prism of different facets of the feminine, and in the center of that circle is the diamond, is that enables us to see the prism. That it prisms out reality so we can see and appreciate these different flavors, and that's the Bhairav, that's the masculine. But, being in all kinds of queer magic, there's no reason to believe that there's not some circle in which there's a circle of diamonds with a diamond in the middle. And what kind of fractal amazingness do you get then when something enables us to see the complexities of the masculine? So it's like just getting to the point in my journey where I'm adding to my own inner library of earth magic, the study of these different archetypes of the masculine beyond the ones that are most personally necessary for me to understand myself. So, if my own inner masculine, primary archetype is kind of like the fringe dweller who sees it all, but doesn't necessarily have a contract to do anything with what they see. And so isn't necessarily a healer, but could heal, can heal, and has information that can heal, but just it's not necessarily, they haven't signed in blood, put their fingerprint next to that kind of a life contract, and doesn't always bathe and wears the same thing every day, and is not that interested in labels and that kind of thing. But to be presented with some of these other archetypes in the dream, and and what's coming to mind is also just the way that success has sort of been conflated with power and power over, and thus many people are afraid of success. And that another commonality of all these men, and sometimes I call it Frankenshiva, because I don't have a better name for it yet, but where there's different archetypes together in a noteworthily interesting combination. But some of these people in the dream were not actual men that I know. They're combinations of a few archetypes that I can name or conjure. But that another quality besides their sort of warmth and just friendliness was they're all not just successful, but very, very successful at what they do. And what they do is creative and is of their own creativity. So it's to me, I feel there's an invitation for me to unpack some of my fear of success and fear of material success. As, my social studies teacher instilled with us, power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. That program hit me really hard. And I think a lot of people. And so even when you say yeah, let's have some Shakti, people are afraid of the sensation of Shakti in their own body. It doesn't feel good because they're so trained that this power and power will corrupt you, So I think that we need some healing around that. We mostly being me, but probably not the only one, in order to receive the friendship and the support and the these were all really fun exchanges that I had in the dream with so it's there's experiences waiting for us on the other side of our fear of power and success, and allowing masculine energy to be totally integrated into a community space or a sacred space, or our bodies or ourselves or our own identities. And I know there's lots of people who will hear this and just be like, what is this lady's problem? Like, I don't relate to anything she's saying. And like, bless you for being healthy. We need folks that are in a different place on this healing journey. But I'm just, speaking for myself here.
Well, I think it's interesting because I'm beginning to wonder if there is anyone who's healthy.
I think they exist. I mean, it's not health is not a thing that you get and then you are. Also, it's like cycles. So in that regard, there's always people who are healthy at one time and people who are in the gunk, in the stinky, rotting part of the death cycle at the same time. And so to kind of not judge any of that, just be like, I'm in a stinky place in this particular set of lessons, or I'm actually thinking of starting to figure something out that's making things feel better for me, making others treat me like a more fun and trustworthy person to be around,
Yeah, I definitely see that. And I'm wondering, I like to call upon my well and ancient ancestors, and I'm like, okay, who are the ones who did have their needs met as babies and children, and who are the ones that did have healthy relating and who had joy in their work? And they went through hardships, of course, and ups and downs, but who are those ancestors and how can they support me now? Because I feel like this is so I don't see it in the near past of my lineages. So like, how do I break these patterns that aren't that? And, and this involves so much relating within with the other, with these different spectrums of masculine and feminine, as we've talked about, and with the earth and the patriarchy. I mean, it's like, it's so big. It's so big. And I know you get it. So, yeah, what even is healthy? And when we've grown up, I feel like I'm like opening up a whole nother 2 hours of conversation, so we don't have to go here at all, but probably want to pin this, but I am gonna say it of like, no, I'm not, because it left my brain. It completely left my brain.
Well, I
So,
got something. Maybe it's
okay.
related to what.
All
Maybe
right,
it
cool.
left
You
your
picked
brain
it
over
up.
here. Because when I am in ceremony, part of my invitation to other benevolent beings to join us is always to say, angels, allies, ancestors of the light, and guides. That's the kind of container that I'm holding most of the time. Unless we are specifically holding an intention to work on a very discrete piece of ancestral trauma, which is rare. So we're actually calling in the ones that do hold that, and only those ones. And then I usually have some prayers and some offerings for the other ancestors too. It's kind of an obvious one, but to go into the light, to let go of
Yeah.
the traumatic embodiment, and that everything good is waiting for them on the other side of this, like letting go, and returning to source for that, great spirit bath. But recently, I had a reading with someone where there was a grandmother who was confused about some things, or had some doubts in a way that I don't associate with someone who's fully one with source. And we did some unpacking of it in the session, and it was like, it's a really benevolent energy. It's a really healthy relationship, but there is something you two are working on. And it was just new for me to have, and to try to say, what is this? They're not one with source, but they're not an unhealthy ancestor either. They're not a disincarnate, or like a fragment that was left behind. What is it? And what came through was that it was related to the time of year that this reading was taking place, where the veils are thinner and where just a little more of the fullness of some of these energies might make it through that invitation of ancestors of the light, and that. So it kind of relates. This conversation for me is taking on a pattern that it keeps coming back to the prism and the spectrum and the fractal nature of reality. And so there's the whole, but then there's all these parts, and they're in motion, and it can feel complex or too much to try to give language to, and we kind of can stall a lot of conversations there when we get into that like primordial undulating flux of the field of consciousness, but I feel like that's where we want to be for magic and healing to occur. So what I'm getting is that like we can, if we can't really find that frequency in the void of healthy ancestors, and we're not really sure which voices are talking to us, it's just not quite clear yet, that we can, like if the whole is overwhelming, we can work with the parts, which I believe is why we even have gender at all, is just sometimes the whole is overwhelming. So I like to say gender is the first cosmology, is the first story that we put into the mix to help us to feel less overwhelmed as we navigate things, is to try to say which of these, there are these two qualities. There is the sun and the moon, and they are different. And so what do you feel goes more with the moon, and what do you feel goes more with the sun? It's just to help us to find the road, the path through it all. And that something that might help us is to just look at parts. Parts, say, this part of my grandfather, archetype, is healthy. My grandfather, there was no sexual energy ever. His sexual energy was very contained. That was very important for me to have that. And then say, well, what parts did not work for me? He was pretty judgmental to my gay cousins, and not in a specific homophobic way, but where all of my cousins that were gay all felt that he was very judgmental in some nebulous, hard to pin down way, So to just allow for that, say, I don't know, but I know this part was nourishing, and I know that part I could take it or leave it. This is part of the reweaving that I talk about, where there's all of these storylines are sort of tangled in a big ball, and karma is sort of tangled in a big ball right now on planet Earth. And then we can kind of like identify, well, I know I'm on the red road, and I see some red threads over there, and they're all tangled up with some orange threads, but I'm just going to see if I can just focus on getting one of those red threads, because I need it for this tapestry over here where we're making apples. We're weaving apples, red ones, so just kind of like keep it simple. We don't have to know everything. We don't have to know if something is in its essence good or bad, or if there's even such thing as good or bad. You can just say like, this is something I really appreciated about Christmas with my family. I'm going to just put that in my medicine bag, and period. Full stop. Work with what I have determined to be medicine. And that's your privilege and your right and your responsibility as the living ancestor of your lineage, You get to. This is your lineage, and you get to decide how the lineage will look going forward in order to stay living and in integrity and healthy.
Right. You're like the elected embodiment right now.
Yeah. So whatever's healthy for you is what's healthy for your ancestors.
I love that. Thank you. Is there anything else that is wanting to come through before we close? Any questions or anything you want to share?
Well, I do think this kind of came together with these few streams around the dream oracle and the ancestral communications as like um, a part of our intuition that can be developed, that anybody can develop. Um, and so I guess I want to share that we do have a process for developing that um, relationship, if that's something that uh, feels interesting, like it could be helpful to anyone listening.
By we have a process, do you mean what you teach in your work, or you just mean we in the general humans?
Oh, well, both. I like the question, but we have many processes for developing that as humans and within all the earth-based traditions. But we have a bundle. I think it's maybe 6 lessons that's called Dreaming with the Ancestors that has a fully pre-recorded version, but will probably hold um, a live version of it this season. So either way, depending on how it all shakes out, either way, that's available for people in our school.
Cool. And what is your school, and where can people find it? Yeah, go.
Yeah. So it's riocosmico.org. And are a few different gateways into what we're doing available there, including the 9-month apprenticeship for people who want to initiate as green witches. That is a whole process. But Dreaming with the Ancestors is short. The lessons are very short. There's a really solid primer in just dream recall, and so it's like anybody can come into it at any point in their journey, so we give you that foundation of dream recall and different dream interpretation practices before we can bring into that the intention of reliably connecting with our ancestors in the dream space and understanding when some of the messages that come through there are coming from our ancestors.
Cool. I love that. I love that this started with a dream and ended with the ancestors, and you have a dreaming with the ancestors offering. That's great. And so, yeah, of course, that's all going to be in the show notes. And is there anything else you want to talk about that you offer and where people can find you?
Well, I guess I'll start with the most out there, which is our Instagram account, which is at Active Culture Family. And then from there, we typically post about new content that we're adding to our library of Earth Magic. And the library is actually physically housed within our homestead. And it takes 2 different forms that you can access online, which is riocosmico.org, which is the sort of meatier content or the like special room where you can't take the books out, you have to be there when the librarian is there. And then on our Patreon, that is like the library that anybody's welcome to walk in and browse, and as is really our part of our commitment to making this work accessible, because we have gone to great physical and financial expense and debt to heal ourselves and find this information. But we don't think that should be the way. We
Agreed.
want to honor what we have found by making it accessible to those who are seeking it. I just say all who seek in sincerity. And I trust that that spell is strong, and I don't need to be going any deeper into gatekeeping. I just need reciprocity. So people can decide if they want to pay 2 or 4 or however many dollars a month in reciprocity. And I really love that model, that I can just give as much as I want and be reciprocated by the community. And I don't need to mind reciprocity onto the one-to-one transactional way of relating. So I say all that to bow to those more mycelial, crowdfunding paradigms, because I am so excited that those were created, and I think they are the way. I hope that enough people continue to feel excited to try those ways of doing things. I want it to be so.
Great. Awesome. Well, of course, that's all linked in the show notes, everybody. And thank you for coming on the show again. And I don't know, this is a really enjoyable journey we've gone on. And thank you for just taking us there. I feel like we've been riding your little magic carpet through the realms. And thank you.
You're welcome. It's always a pleasure to get on the magic carpet with you. I always find myself smiling a lot, laughing a lot. Feel the earth people alive in you, and I'm grateful.
Thanks.
Many blessings to you.
Blessings to you.
All the roads are windy.
Listen to over 200 free Earthspeak podcast episodes on your favorite podcast app and visit earthspeak.love to learn about our collective community and workshops.